Let me tell you how the Great Pigeon War of Suburbia went down. A tale so ridiculous, so oddly satisfying. I still half expect to wake up and find it was just some fever dream brought on by too much. Leftover pizza and existential dread. You ever have one of those mornings where nothing feels real? That's how this all started. Me, Alex, having a staring contest with a pigeon I'd named General Cluckington, right there on my cracked patio, dusting out organic bird seed while still in my pajamas, questioning all my life choices. Now, I know what you're thinking, feeding pigeons. That's harmless, right? That's what I thought too. But let me tell you, in the bland heart of Ohio suburbia, nothing is ever that simple, especially with neighbors like Brenda. See, Brenda was the kind of woman who made the Navy SEALs look disorganized. Her roses stood at attention. Her grass looked like it saluted at sunrise. She patrolled our cul-de-sac like a drill sergeant. On caffeine, every move so precise I swear the squirrels started wearing camouflage just to blend in. But there I was, feeding my crew, General Cluckington, Wingman, Professor Featherbottom. And the cheeky one I dubbed Brenda's bane. He made it his mission to drop little presents on her lawn, which I tried not to encourage, but you know how it is. And every day, right as Brenda would power walk past my fence, I'd feel her laser eyes burning a hole in my slightly overgrown grass, silently judging every wayward dandelion and empty coffee cup. Still, it was peaceful, just me, my birds, and the steady hum of digital deadlines. That lasted about 3 days. Then, like a storm brewing in a Tupperware sky, Brenda appeared, righteous indignation practically radiating off her tracksuit. "Excuse me," she barked, hands on hips, hair shining like a helmet. "Are you the one feeding these rats with wings?" Let me back up a sec. Brenda didn't do small talk. She did interventions. She accused me of running a bird cafeteria, insisted my birds were tanking property values, and threatened to call the HOA, the city, the EPA, maybe even NASA for all I know. I tried to play it cool, sarcasm's my default setting, but even I was rattled when she marched off, promising retribution. Next morning, right as I was contemplating the tragic lack of decent fonts in Microsoft Word, I got a knock on the door. Not the friendly kind. Official. There stood Officer Dave, looking like he'd rather be wrestling an alligator, and Brenda, positively glowing with anticipation. "We got a call about aggressive pigeon feeding," he grumbled. Brenda, of course, chimed in, talking about health hazards and unsanitary practices, waving around phrases like public menace and property damage. Officer Dave just asked me to keep the peace, cracked a smile at my pigeons, and lumbered back to his cruiser, probably to tell his partner how utterly nuts suburban life could be. But I wasn't about to give in. If Brenda wanted communication, she was about to get more polite, persistent, utterly inescapable communication than she'd ever seen. So began Operation Feathered Diplomacy, a masterwork of caffeine, passive aggression, and enough tiny scrolls to fill a dollhouse library. I trained my pigeons, crafted polite, handwritten notes, even invented a capsule drop system, because if you're going to do psychological warfare, you might as well do it elegantly. My best friend Mark, ever the voice of reason, thought I'd lost my mind. "You're waging war with a pigeon army and stationary," he laughed. "Not war," I said. "A diplomatic mission. General Cluckington's the communications attaché." It took weeks of trial and error. Turns out, pigeons are creatures of habit, not natural postmen. But soon enough, my feathered commandos were landing on Brenda's porch, dropping polite, cryptic little notes like, "Wishing you a day as pleasant as the coo of a morning dove." Brenda started leaving the notes out in protest, so I just had the birds drop new ones every morning. She escalated, tiny no trespassing signs, plastic owls, even a sprinkler system, aimed right at her porch. The birds barely noticed. Cluckington even seemed to enjoy the challenge. I realized I'd need to scale up, so I hired a contractor named S to build a full-on pigeon command center on my roof, complete with tiny trapdoors and a hidden note locker. The crew thought I was nuts. S just winked and said, "Best pigeon hotel in Ohio, kid." Then, just when Brenda seemed ready to snap, the authorities returned. This time, Brenda shoved a bag of tiny scrolls at Officer Dave and his rookie partner, shouting about avian harassment. The young cop tried not to laugh as she read out my notes, compliments about hydrangeas, hopes for a terrific Tuesday. Ma'am, there's no law against being aggressively pleasant, she said. Brenda, furious, turned to the HOA. The meeting was a circus. Brenda waving my polite pigeon notes like evidence at a trial, accusing me of waging psychological warfare, neighbors quietly giggling behind their hands. I gave a PowerPoint on the historical importance of carrier pigeons, argued my case for community, and even threw in a few made-up statistics about how happy neighbors increase property values. The vote was close, but Brenda's motion failed. I walked out a hero. Well, at least to Mrs. Henderson, who thought the pigeons were just darling. But I knew Brenda wasn't finished. For the block party, the crown jewel of her social calendar, I planned one last act of petty genius. I spent days training my birds to deliver not scrolls, but dandelions, the one weed Brenda hated more than anything. As Brenda stood at the center of her immaculate kingdom, giving her annual, "Isn't our community perfect?" speech, my pigeons swooped down, dropping dandelions at every guest's feet. All except hers, of course. The crowd erupted in laughter. Brenda was speechless for the first time ever. The days after were oddly quiet. I felt empty, honestly. The war was over, and I wasn't sure what to do with myself. Even General Cluckington seemed a little aimless. Then one day, Brenda showed up at the fence, not angry, just tired. She surprised me, asking how I trained the pigeons for the dandelion drop, even hinted at wanting to recruit me for a new mission, targeting the Hendersons' yappy dog with 3 a.m. biscuit deliveries. I realized, right then, that our war had ended in a truce, maybe even a strange, bird-fueled friendship. And so, my days of petty pigeon politics came to a close, but in the weirdest twist of all, the Sentinel and I found common ground, united by a love of mischief and a mutual respect for what a little creativity and a lot of sunflower hearts can accomplish. What would you have done in my place? Gone full Cold War? Or tried to make peace with your own Brenda? Drop your story in the comments. Let's see whose suburban saga takes the cake. And hey, if you ever need a pigeon postmaster, you know where to find me. You'd think that after surviving a pigeon-powered standoff with Brenda, I'd retire from neighborhood shenanigans, just kick back, live my best boring suburban life, maybe finally fix the door on my mailbox that's been dangling for months. But you know how it goes. The calm after the storm isn't real calm. It's just the neighborhood catching its breath, waiting for the next ridiculous thing to happen. And honestly, I'd gotten used to the chaos. It felt weird not having a daily mission, no scrolls to craft, no tiny feathers to sweep off my keyboard, no passive-aggressive post-it notes to hide in sunflower seed bags. For about a week, things actually went back to normal. Well, as normal as you get in a cul-de-sac where pigeons have a command center on the roof and the local HOA has an emergency protocol for avian correspondence. Brenda barely left her house except for a quick lap around her garden, looking more tired than mad now. I caught her eye once or twice. She didn't scowl. She didn't glare. She just gave me a look that said, "What next?" And honestly, I didn't have an answer. That all changed the following Saturday. I was out front, fixing my crooked mailbox, when Mark pulled up in his beat-up Honda. He rolled down his window, grinning like he knew a secret. "Heard about you and Brenda forming the world's weirdest peace treaty," he called out, waving a box of donuts in the air like a white flag. "So, what's the next crusade, General?" I shrugged, but the wheels in my brain were already turning. Maybe it was the sugar rush from the second maple bar, or the fact that General Cluckington had started leaving dandelion stems on my desk as some kind of message. Whatever it was, I suddenly remembered Brenda's pitch about that yappy dog. 3 doors down. You know the type. Napoleon, all bark, no bite, probably compensating for his size by declaring war on every trash can and jogger in a 5-mile radius. Let me back up a sec. Brenda, of all people, asking me for help with a prank? That's how you know suburban life is a weird loop. So when she caught me that afternoon, watering my half-dead hydrangeas, she didn't waste time. She leaned over the fence, voice low, eyes sharp. "So, about that little project we discussed. Still interested? Only if I get creative control," I said, grinning. And just like that, an alliance was born. Not a friendship, not exactly, but something better. A partnership in harmless chaos. That evening, we drew up plans, dog biscuits, squeaky toys, a pigeon delivery system time to Drop treats on Napoleon's windowsill at exactly 3 a.m., the canine equivalent of a wake-up call. Brenda was disturbingly good at logistics. "We'll need at least 3 drop points," she muttered, sketching a map of the Hendersons' yard with more detail than Google Earth. Training the birds was easier this time. General Cluckington was now a pro, and even Brenda's Bane got in on the action. The first night was a test run, 1 biscuit, a tiny bow, and a note. With compliments, the neighborhood watch. The result? A 4 a.m. Facebook rant from Mrs. Henderson about mysterious airborne snacks, and a photo of Napoleon howling at the moon, surrounded by crumbs. I thought I'd feel bad. Instead, I laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee all over my laptop. Even Brenda cracked a smile. Well, a twitch at the corner of her mouth, but for her, that was basically a belly laugh. That's when the rest of the block started to notice. Suddenly, our little war had an audience. Mrs. Henderson, now convinced there was a dog biscuit bandit on the loose, started leaving out milk bones as a peace offering. The Johnson twins from 2 doors down launched a counteroffensive. Tiny paper airplanes with jokes written on them, aimed at Brenda's yard. The neighborhood, once all quiet stares and tight smiles, was coming alive. People waving more, kids running between lawns. Even a couple of good morning nods from folks who'd never spoken before. I'd never admit it to Brenda, but I think she loved it, being at the center of the story, not the villain this time, but the ringleader of some strange, pigeon-assisted neighborhood renaissance. She started dropping by more often, sometimes with a suggestion, sometimes just to watch the birds swoop and dive. We didn't talk about the old days, her HOA complaints, my arsenal of sunflower hearts. We just enjoyed the game. And, maybe there's a lesson in all this. Maybe petty drama and passive-aggressive pigeon notes are just the suburbs' way of shaking off the dust, forcing people to look up from their perfectly manicured lawns and actually notice each other. Maybe it's not about the birds at all. Maybe it's about finding something, anything, that gets you off autopilot, gives you a story to tell. Funny thing is, the great dog biscuit caper never got solved. Napoleon's still barking, but now Mrs. Henderson blames raccoons, and Brenda and I share a conspiratorial glance every time we hear that muffled yelp at 3 a.m. The pigeons, meanwhile, have found new jobs, delivering birthday cards, surprise notes, even the occasional good luck charm on test days for the neighborhood kids. General Cluckington's practically a local celebrity. Someone knitted him a tiny scarf. For winter. It's not perfect. The mailbox is still crooked. The hydrangeas are still dying. But the street feels different now. Less like a row of locked doors and more like, well, a community. Brenda, of all people, brings over cookies sometimes. She says they're for the birds, but I know better. So, if you're out there, dealing with your own Brenda, your own HOA, or your own flock of oddly judgmental pigeons, don't underestimate the power of a little mischief, a little stubbornness, and a whole lot of creativity. You never know, your biggest headache could end up being your weirdest, most memorable friendship. Now, your turn. Drop your best neighborhood drama in the comments. Tell me what wild suburban legend you'd want my pigeons to pull off next, or just tell me where you're watching from. And if you see a pigeon with a tiny scarf and an attitude, give him a sunflower seed from me. Who knows? Maybe your story's the next one to shake up the neighborhood.